Good morning. Today we'll be discussing about the historical background of Indian Constitution. In the previous classes, we have seen certain fundamental points for our better understanding of the overall Constitution. So, whatever the background you have so far, that will be helpful to you to understand the Indian Constitution in a better manner. But before we go into the actual topics of this Indian Constitution, let us try to look at the background of Indian Constitution. What do you mean by this? The meaning of Constitution we have understood. It is a set of laws. But these laws have come into the picture for India only from the year 1950. Meaning, on January 26th, 1950, our Constitution has commenced. It came into the force. Meaning that is the beginning of India's journey with respect to the Indian Constitution, Indian laws. But before that, before 1950, in the year 1947, we got the independence. But what happened between 1947 and 1950? That is one story. Apart from this, before 1947 also, there were certain rules that were implemented in India. But India did not have any constitution of its own. What happened during that time? So that is what we are going to understand in this particular chapter. So when I use the word historical background, we are specifically concentrating on what happened in India before the year 1947. And if you know clearly, for quite a long period of time, the British has ruled India. And if you go back to the year 1600, that was the beginning of East India Company in India. Kindly remember, during that time there were two East India companies. One was the French East India Company, and the second one is the English East India Company. So whatever we are going to talk now, that is related to the English East India Company. So in future also, so in today's class, if I am using the word East India Company, take it for granted. This is the English East India Company. So this is the number one. And another important point I would like to tell you, whatever the subject I am going to talk to you now, historical background of the Indian Constitution, this is part of our syllabus, that is Indian polity. And apart from this, from this area, you will also be getting questions in the main examination for civil services. Hence, it is a part of the history, modern history, and it is also a part of paper number one of public administration. So, by reading and understanding one particular topic here, in any area, if there is a question tomorrow, you will be in a position to answer. Meaning, certain areas that are present in the syllabus, they are somewhere they are overlap. So, in fact, it becomes easy for a candidate to prepare for the examination. So, whatever we are preparing now, that will be useful for preliminary level, for the civil services or any other examination, plus some part in the Indian history at the main level is also covered. Plus one chapter is completely related to this area in public administration, paper number one. Of course, when we come to those topics, we will have some more discussions and we'll try to add some more points. But this topic will give you a firm ground. But in this particular topic, we are coming across with various acts, various years, and also various personalities. Hence, I request all of you to pay a very good attention and listen and try to revise this very periodically. So this is one important area where the candidates who are preparing for this examination, they will neglect it. But this area should not be neglected, especially you. You should not neglect this, because if somebody is neglecting this area, so definitely there is a possibility for them to lose the marks in this area. So this is the place where you can score better. Hence, it will be useful for various areas in various topics. That is what we are going to discuss now. So if I go back to the year 1600, during that time, the East India Company has come to India. What is this East India Company, first of all? This East India Company is related to England, and they took the permission from the crown, and they got the exclusive rights for trading in India. But before that one, actually, the basic idea of this East India Company is to travel towards India so that they can have some business over there. And if you look towards east of India, we have some island called Spice Islands. So today I am using the word Indonesia. You must be knowing Indonesia is a largest archipelago in the world. Archipelago in the sense group of islands. More than 4,000 islands are present in Indonesia, and all the areas put together is called archipelago. And today we are using the word Indonesia. So this Indonesian area, it was very, very famous for spices. During that time, there was a huge business opportunity, or rather market in the European areas with respect to these spices. And this East India Company wanted to exploit that. It traveled, it came to India, it traveled towards Indonesia. But after reaching there, it saw that the area is already occupied by some other companies. Hence, it started coming back. Then it decided to start its business in India. So this is the place where it got the exclusive rights to go for the business. And starting from 1600 up to the year 1773, that is for a period of 173 years, the East India Company was present in India. But starting from the year 1773, the domination of East India Company has been started. Hence, we are dividing our discussion into some areas. Like between 1600 and 1773, what happened? Between 1773 and 1883, what happened? Between 1883 up to 1858, what happened? We are going to see. And the next step will be starting from 1858 up to the year 1947, what happened? From 1947 to 50, what happens? So I have divided this area, one topic, into so many parts so that it becomes easy for us to understand. Now we'll see one after the other. Kindly remember, starting from 1600 up to the year 1773, East India Company was very much present in India. But for the first time, starting from 1773, with the powers that are given by the British Crown, kindly remember when I use the word British Crown, it is either the King or the Queen of England. By taking the permission from the Crown, so they started issuing the orders in India, and that continued from 1773 up to the year 1858. 1858. And in the year 1858, the British Parliament, they have abolished the East India Company in India, and the control over India has been taken over by the British directly. So meaning 1773 up to the year 1858, it was under the clutches of the East India Company. And in 1858, India was taken over by the direct control of the British government. So from 1858, it continued up to August 15th, 1947. So what happened during this period? So we will try to have a discussion. Now I will open the document for you. Again, I am repeating. So many years will come into picture. So many personalities will come into picture. So many acts is coming into picture. And whatever the point I am going to talk to you, each and every point is important for the examination. Hence, pay a lot of attention and understand this is one area which is neglected by so many people in various examinations. So this is the place where they lose the marks, and this is the place where I want you to score the marks. Obviously, your score will be higher than the others, and you will be getting good marks. All right, let me open the document. Kindly see it. If you are preparing for the civil service examination, I'll be also touching the analytical part of this for you people. But otherwise, for remaining people who are preparing for other examinations, you try to understand the concept, you try to remember the facts more. Now, so let me open the document here straight away. I'll have a discussion with you. I'll start the discussion. Look at this. Just a moment. I'll increase this. Hopefully, you can see it better. Yes, now. Look at this now. This is the historical background we have started. I have given this in a very elaborate manner. Kindly have a look at this. In this chapter, let us know what exactly happened during the British rule that prompted and provoked Indians to think of a separate constitution. This is what I was telling you. So we got the constitution only from January 26th, 1950 onwards. But even before that, also, there were certain rules that were present in India. There were acts that were present in India. But during that time, these acts were made for India by the British parliaments. Hence, before the commencement of the constitution, whatever the laws that are present in India, those laws were considered to be the acts or that itself was a constitution. And based on the experience what we have achieved during that particular period, Indians got motivated. Indians started thinking that yes, India should become an independent nation and India should have a constitution of its own, and that constitution must be prepared by the Indians itself. It's a very big story. Kindly listen with lots of patience. There may be some areas in this particular topic where you may feel bored. Okay, you may get bored also. There is no doubt about this. But if it is boring or interesting, is also you need to follow this. You need to understand. So because you are going to prepare for the competitive examination. Now, I'll come to this document. I am opening it for you. Look at this. The British came to India in the year 1600 as traders in the form of East India Company. That is the beginning. So the British has entered into India. They have entered India in the form of East India Company. Now, the East India Company was also known as East India Trading Company or English East India Company. Of course, only for the clarification's sake, I have given it to you. But if you come across with the word East India Company, it is nothing but English East India Company. Now, the East India Company was founded in the year 1600 for persuading the trade with East Indies. You can just have a look at this. That is nothing but South Asia and Southeast Asia. So that is the basic purpose. So for which it has been founded. Look at this. Look at this next one. But the East India Company traded mainly in the Indian subcontinent and China. Next, the East India Company has the exclusive rights to trade in India. Over a period of time, see here, that started in the year 1600, over a long period of time, in the year 1765, the East India Company obtained Diwani. Diwani is nothing but rights over revenue and civil justice. And they got it in the areas called Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. Is it okay? So that was the beginning. Later, in the year 1858, after the Sepoy Mutiny, British Crown assumed direct responsibility for the governance of India. Meaning before 1858 or up to 1858, it was East India Company, and from now onwards, from 1858 onwards, there was a Sepoy Mutiny in 1857. I'll come to this topic later. But otherwise, the British Crown has assumed direct responsibility of governance of India. So we are going to understand what happened before 1858 and what happened from 1858. And the British rule continued in India up to August 15th, 1947. Okay, and this is the date on which India got independence. But the acts of British continued to exist in India up to the year 1950, up to January 26th. And on that particular day, we got our own constitution, and majority of the laws that were prepared by the British Parliament, they were considered to be repealed. But there are some laws that were made by the British government are existing in India even today also. This is one criticism in India. Why are you keeping those laws intact even today also? Can't you prepare your own laws? When we come to that topic, I'll tell you what are those laws. I'll with examples, I'll give it to you. Okay. Now, I'm opening the document and have a look at this. I have just given it for you. The above few lines are the very brief description. Kindly see here. I'll just type one thing here. This particular notes is already available here. Just typing it here. After the completion of the class, you can just go through these points if you want, whatever is highlighted over there. So this is our site only. In that open polity part, and there you go to this historical background. Entire Indian polity notes is available. You can just go through this, but follow these classes along with me. Now, so this is one point. Just remember this. So now, so we'll be learning what happened between 1600 and 1947. I told you already, from 1600 up to the year 1773, the East India Company was present in India and it was doing its own business. From 1773 onwards, it started issuing the orders and new acts have come to the picture. Look at this. Look at this. The company rule between 1773 and 1858 and the Regulating Act of 1773. Meaning for the first time, an act has come into the picture and that is called Regulating Act of 1773. Regulating, that is a controlling. Look at this. Each part is important. I'm just reminding you very often. This was the first step taken by the British government to control and regulate the affairs of East India Company in India. Is that okay? This is the meaning is simple. Up to the year 1773, starting from 1600, lots of freedom was given to East India Company, but They have regulated the affairs of the East India Company in India, meaning this is an act that was passed in the British Parliament to regulate, to control the affairs. Affairs means activities of East India Company in India. That is the point here. That is the beginning of this particular discussion. Look at this. The political and administrative functions of the company were recognized for the first time. Basically, see here, they came here on the name of the trade. But over a period of time, they started performing something called political and administrative functions. And those functions are for the first time recognized by the British government. And this particular act laid the foundation of central administration in India. Kindly remember this one. This is the foundation for central administration. The foundation has come into the picture because of the Regulating Act of 1773. Kindly remember this. Okay. Now we'll try to see what are the features. Features means characteristics of 1773 Act. What are the important points? We'll try to understand here. Look at this. The governor of Bengal. See here, so we have some important people during our discussion. We'll try to see here. Sometimes you might have heard about these words like Viceroy of India or Governor General of India. Basically, this concept was existing in India for quite long period of time since the entry of the East India Company. During that time, they concentrated more on Bengal. When I use the word Bengal, I am talking about today's West Bengal plus today's Bangladesh. These two areas put together was called Bengal. Over a period of time, there was a partition, there was a reunion, and in the year 1947, the today's Bangladesh area, the so-called East Bengal, it went to the Pakistan. And the same area got liberated in 1971, and now we are calling that area as Bangladesh. But otherwise, today's Bangladesh plus today's West Bengal put together was called Bengal, and this area was strategically very important for the East India Company for its trade. And from there, it has expanded. It went to various other countries, other states, other areas like maybe Bombay, maybe Chennai, that is Madras. It went to so many places. Now, so from this particular area was governed by a position, and that position was called Governor of Bengal. And later, the designation of Governor of Bengal has been changed to Governor General of Bengal. Person was same, but the designation has been changed. And over a period of time, the designation of the Governor General of Bengal has been changed to Governor General of India. And again, after a period of time, the designation of Governor General of India has been changed to Viceroy of India. And again, in the year 1947, the designation of Viceroy has been again changed to the Governor General of India. And what are the acts which changed this designation from one to the other? We'll try to see, and we'll begin with the 1773 Regulating Act. Let's try to understand. Look at this, the first point. The first Governor General of Bengal was Lord Warren Hastings. Kindly remember this name, very frequently asked name in the examinations. Next point. The 1773 Act made the governors of Bombay and Madras presidencies subordinate to the Governor General of Bengal. Hope you are getting it. Very, very important. In fact, they were called governors before that. But the Governor of Bengal designation has been changed to Governor General of Bengal. And he was made superior to other governors like Bombay and Madras presidencies. Am I clear? Next, I'm moving further. This act provided for the establishment of Supreme Court in Calcutta in the year 1774. First time, so we are coming across this word Supreme Court here, and that was established through 1773 Regulating Act. But kindly remember, this particular court was not as powerful as the so-called today's court, today's Supreme Court, but that was the area. The area was limited. Its jurisdiction was very much limited. But when it comes to today's Supreme Court, in fact, it was established through Government of India Act of 1935, and it was called Federal Court of India. Kindly remember, don't get confused. But otherwise, there may be a possibility of question through which act the Supreme Court was established in Calcutta. Answer is Regulating Act of 1773. Okay, now during that time, this court comprised of a chief justice and three other judges. Not at all important for us. Go ahead. This act prohibited the servants of the company from engaging in any private trade or accepting presentations or bribe from the natives. So here, look at the names here. Presentations means gifts. Natives means local people. So since that time itself, they were very, very serious. British government was very serious. They never wanted any employee from this particular East India Company to accept any gift from the people. Don't take any bribe from the so-called the local people. Local in the sense, these are the native people. These are the people of India. So that was the restriction that was put. Now look at this. I'm moving still down. Yeah. The 1773 Act strengthened the control of British government over the company by requiring the court of directors to report on its revenue, civil and military affairs in India. I told you already, this is considered to be the centralization. Central power has been established, meaning the East India Company affairs were completely controlled by the British government, by the British Parliament. That is the reason why the British government asked this court of directors that are present in East India Company to report on its revenue, to report on its civil and military affairs, what you are performing in India. Next one. In the year 1781, the Act of Settlement passed by the British Parliament to rectify the defects of 1773 Act. Kindly remember, 1773 Act was the first one. There were some deficiencies in this. In order to settle those deficiencies, a new act has come into the picture. That is the 1781 Act of Settlement. Okay. Now, the next one is the Pitt's India Act of 1784. We have seen one act. Kindly remember the sequence. First one is the 1773 Regulating Act. Next one is the Pitt's India Act of 1784. Look at this. This Pitt's India Act distinguished between commercial and political functions of the company. So now there is a division between, there is a distinction between commercial and political functions of East India Company. Look at this. Previously, there was only one thing that is called the Court of Directors, and they were asked to report to the British government regarding their revenue, regarding the military, regarding their civil affairs. Now, the Court of Directors have been entrusted with the responsibility to manage commercial affairs. Hope you are getting. Commercial activities should be managed by Court of Directors. But there is another body that is called Board of Control. It was entrusted with the responsibility of the political affairs. Very, very important here. Court of Directors, Commercial Affairs. Board of Control, the responsibility of the political affairs. Thus, for the first time, so we can use this word, a dual government was established in India. So thus the Pitts India Act was established the dual government in India. If you want to read the points, you can just read out for a moment. Right. Kindly remember the sequence again. 1773, 1784. Look at this now. For the first time, the company territories in India were the first time called British possessions in India. Very, very important. Otherwise, wherever the British company was present, the East India Company, those were considered as the company areas or company territories. But the British has recognized them as the British possessions. So in India, and it happened through the 1784 Pitt's India Act. And later we are coming across with the Charter Act of 1833. See here, kindly remember what I would like to tell you is that whatever the acts that were present in India before the independence, they were considered to be the actual laws because Indians were innocent, Indians were illiterate during that time. We could not understand during the time. And another important reason is that just like today, the concept of unity was not there. Hence, during that time, so there were so many other kingdoms that were present in India, right? So, of course, when we come to the topics of the history, so we can mix up them. So now we'll see only this, the political part here. That is the Charter Act of the 1833. Now, this is the final step towards centralization of power in India. The first step began with the 1773 Act, and the final step towards the centralization of power in India came into existence through the Charter Act of 1833. Let's see here what is centralization. Simple point here. The opposite word for centralization is the decentralization. If I am using the word centralization, all the powers, all the powers in the sense, I'm talking about the decision making. So the decision making authority lies with the few people or one person at the highest level. But when I use the word decentralization, the decision making power will be existing in various places in the hierarchy. Hierarchy is nothing but a structure who will take the decisions in their respective capacities. But this particular act made it very, very clear, and it was considered to be the final step towards the centralization. Centralization began with the 1773 Act and completely concluded through 1833 Act. Okay. Now, again, let's come back to the document. Let me open it to you. So, the centralization is nothing but the concentration of the power in single authority. Now, look at this. The Governor General of Bengal was made the Governor General of India. So this person became Governor General of India to the 1833 Act. And the first Governor General of India was Lord William Bentinck. Kindly remember this one. He was the last Governor General for Bengal, and the same person has been designated as the first Governor General of India. And the gentleman's name was Lord William Bentinck. Next point. The laws that were made prior to 1833 were called regulations. How do you control? How do you regulate the activities of the this East India Company? And the laws that were made from and after 1833, these charters they were called acts. So the laws that were made under 1833 charter were called acts. Previously it was regulations, now it is called the acts. So the East India Company purely became the administrative body. Otherwise, basically it came to India with the purpose of commercial activities. From commercial body, it became the administrative body. Okay. and this happened through 1833 Act. Next, this act also provided for the company's territories in India were held by it in trust for His Majesty, Her Heirs, and successors. So, what are all the areas that are under the control of the company? It went to the trust of His Majesty. His Majesty is nothing but the so-called the king or the queen. That is nothing but the crown. Look at this next one. The superintendent's direction and control of whole civil and military government of all the British territories and revenues in India was expressly vested in the Governor General of India in Council, meaning a new government has been established in India. For the first time, the Governor General's government was known as Government of India. Otherwise, previously it was called Governor General's government. So from now onwards, we start using the word Government of India. And the council is nothing but a group of members. Today we are using the word Council of Ministers, but it was called, the council was known as Indian Council. Look at this next one. This council was enlarged for legislative work by the addition of a law member in addition to the existing three, meaning three members were there in the council. It is not just for implementing, you also need to make the laws. So, for performing this legislative function, you need to enlarge, expand Indian Council. For that reason, a law member was added and the strength has become four. Otherwise, before that, it was just three. Look at this. This act has attempted to introduce a system of open competition for selection of civil servants. This is one important point in this area. Kindly try to understand this. In India, today we have the open competition system. That open competition system came into existence into India since the year 1854. Kindly remember 1854. But the first attempt was made through 1833 Act. That is the reason in the brackets, if you look at this, this was just an attempt, but the open competition system was introduced later. What do you mean by open competition? Today, whatever the examination you are writing, that is an open competition. Open competition means the government or the so-called UPSC or State Public Service Commission or Staff Selection Commission or RRB, whatever it is, they release the notification. They let the people to know that there are vacancies in the government. If you are interested, if you are qualified, then you can apply for writing the examination. That is called the open competition. And that came into India since 1854, but the first attempt was made through 1833 Charter Act. Now, I'm moving further. Look at this. Indians were not debarred from holding any place, office, and employment under the company, but negated because of the opposition from the Court of Directors. Already we have seen Court of Directors, Board of Control. Court of Directors is for commercial activities, Board of Directors for political activities, that is administrative activities. But here, the Court of Directors have opposed, there was an opposition, but otherwise Indians were not debarred, but they were not permitted because of the opposition from Court of Directors. Look at this. We have a question in the year 2003. It was given in UPSC examination. Just read the question, please. The question is direct and simple here. Which one of the following provisions was not made in the Charter Act of 1833? Look at the word. For your sake, I have underlined this and I made it in red color. Only to have special focus. Not made. So A, B, C, D are given. Out of that, three were given in the 1833 Act and one was not given. And what is that? You just see here. Of course, I have already highlighted the answer, that is D, but read it for the sake of our better understanding. The trading activities of East India Company were to be abolished. Yes, I told you already. The commercial activities from a commercial body, the East India Company was made administrative body. That is the reason why the trading activities were abolished. The designation of the Supreme Authority was to be changed as the Governor General of India in Council. Did we use this word? Yes, we have used this word. Hence, that was also there. And all the lawmaking powers to be conferred on Governor General in Council. Just now I told you there were three members. One person was inducted. He was considered to be a law member for performing the legislative functions. And 1 to 3, that is A, B, C are present in the 1833 Act. But when it comes to D, kindly read and understand. An Indian was to be appointed as a law member in the Governor General's Council is wrong. It was not mentioned in the Charter Act of 1833. Okay, am I clear? Now, I'm moving forward. For a period of time, I will give you so many questions. You don't think about these questions now. Now we are coming towards the Charter Act of 1853. Charter Act of 1833 is over. So now I am talking about the Charter Act of 1853. Can you remember? This was the last Charter Act passed by the British Parliament between 1793 and 1853. And for the first time, this act has created the Legislative Council. And if you look at the Legislative Council, this Legislative Council functioned as a mini parliament. Clear? It is not the parliament, but some responsibilities of lawmaking have been given to the Legislative Council with the overall control of the Governor General. Next one. Look at this. The Charter Act of 1853 introduced open competition system of selection and recruitment of civil servants. For the first time, Indians were permitted to write the civil service examination. Otherwise, before that, Indians were not permitted to write this examination. Otherwise, if you remember, during that time, the services were divided into covenanted and non-covenanted services. Covenanted means higher level services. Non-covenanted means lower level services. And Indians were permitted only for the non-covenanted services. But for the first time, with the introduction of the open competition system for selection to the covenanted services, Indians were also permitted to write the examination. That's the reason why, with respect to the open competition system, the 1853 Charter Act is very, very important. And that is the beginning. For the first time, it was introduced in 1854, the very next year. But kindly remember, attempt was made. Attempt was made in the year 1833. That was not a success. But in 1853, through the Charter Act, the open competition system has been introduced in India. Okay, now let me go to the next one. Right, look at this. This particular one was also open to Indians, and Indians were permitted to take part in the competitive examination. And look at this. Accordingly, Macaulay Committee, and this committee was called Committee on Indian Civil Services, was appointed in the year 1854, and that is the beginning of the open competition system of selection and recruitment of civil servants in India has begun. And kindly remember this, in some examinations they are asking this question very frequently. Satyendranath Tagore was the first Indian to join the civil services. Important statement. This is an important point. Let's try to remember this. Every point is important. This open competition system was introduced by Charter Act of 1853. Later, Macaulay Committee was appointed in 1854. This committee was called the Committee on Indian Civil Services. And Satyendranath Tagore was the first Indian to join the civil services. Okay, I'm moving further here now. Look at this. So, so this is the end of the story here with respect to the East India Company. Just a moment. Just to show you something. Now, now look at this. Now, see here, so this is what happened starting from 1600 to 1773 and 1773 to up to 1854 we have seen. And this continued further up to the year 1857. And in the Indian history, the 1857 year is the most remembered day, most remembered year for the atrocities that have taken place in India. It is not just in one place or two places here. The people were really frustrated because of the rule of the East India Company. And that frustration has become anger and that became a revolt. And that serious revolt has come into existence. It was surfaced in the year 1857. In a very, very huge manner, it happened in various parts of the country. Of course, during that time, Indians were unorganized. Indian group was unorganized. But when it comes to the East India Company, they have the trained military. That is the reason why it became easy for them. It became easy for them to suppress the revolt. What happened in India during that time. And within a short period of time, very brutally, the revolt was suppressed by the East India Company. But that was considered to be an eye opener. That's the reason why some people call it as the first war of Indian independence that began in the year 1857. Various reasons are there for that: social, economic, political, and so many administrative reasons. So many are there. And when we talk about the Indian history, we'll have a discussion on that in a detailed manner. But let me go ahead from here into our topic. So that was an eye opener for the British government, and the British has realized that this is the time that you need to change the administrative system in India. Already, the so-called the commercial body of East India Company became the administrative body, and the entire administration is present in the hands of the East India Company. And the British government thought that this is the time that you need to change the system here. Otherwise, in future also, there may be a possibility of the similar kind of revolts, and in future, the people may be fighting against the government in India in an organized manner. Then it becomes very difficult. Then it becomes very difficult for the people, for the East India Company to control it. Hence, the British government, they have decided to pass an act, and they have passed an act called Government of India Act of 1858. And this is considered to be the first major act that was prepared by the British Parliament for India. What happened through this? The British has announced that this act is considered to be an act for good government in India. What is the meaning of this? It is a mechanism to convince the people that are present in India. Yes, we understood your problems. The administration was not good, the ruling was not good, and we are abolishing the East India Company rule in India. And whatever the role that was performed by East India Company will be taken over completely by the British government. Meaning, British government started looking into the administration of India directly. And that happened through the 1858 Act. At the same time, The designation of the Governor General of India has been changed to the Viceroy of India. So this is the again the second step as far as our journey is concerned, and so many things have happened after this. Now we'll try to see one after the others. Okay, I'll show you the points now, starting from 1858 Act. Now, look at this. This is the Crown Rule, starting from 1858 up to the year 1947. The Government of India Act 1858. Okay, you can see here in the examination, if you want to write this as like this, you are very much permitted. Okay, so you can just say GOI 1858. So this is also very much permitted. So many times you will come across the word that is called the Government of India. Okay, GOI. Now, this came into being after the Sipai Mutiny of 1857. Okay, look at this. So regarding this moment, our mutiny, we'll try to see when we talk about the Indian history. Kindly remember, this act is also known as the Act for Good Government in India. This is the first statute enacted by the Parliament for the governance of India under the direct rule of the British government. Okay, all these days it was East India Company rule. From now onwards, it is the British government direct rule over India, and this decision was taken by the British Parliament. Now, this Government of India Act of 1858 has abolished the East India Company rule in India. Next, I'm going to the next point here. The British Crown assumed sovereignty over India from the East India Company, meaning from now onwards, every decision that is related to India will be made by the British Crown and not by the East India Company, because East India Company's rule has been abolished. And the designation of the Governor General of India was changed to the Viceroy of India. Okay, and the same thing here. The last Governor General of India was Lord Canning, and the first Viceroy was the same gentleman. He was the Lord Canning. It becomes easy to remember the names here because the same person, the last Governor General of Bengal, became the first Governor General of India, and the last Governor General of India, he became the first Viceroy of India. Okay, the same names here. Now, if you go to the next point, the Government of India Act of 1858, it has abolished the Board of Control and Court of Directors. We have discussed these points, right? Kindly remember these names here. Court of Directors for commercial activities and Board of Control for administrative purposes. But both were abolished by this particular act. Now, next point, you can have a look at here. A new position called Secretary of State for India was created, and the powers of the Crown were exercised by the Secretary of State for India. Hope you are getting it. Meaning, apart from the Governor General of India or the so-called the Viceroy of India, you also have another position called Secretary of State for India, and he will be exercising the powers of British Crown, meaning British Crown started exercising its powers through Secretary of State for India, and who is directly answerable to the so-called the British Parliament. Look at this next point. The Secretary of State for India is a member of the cabinet. Cabinet means what? Group of ministers. Yesterday I was telling you. And the Secretary of State, whoever is appointed here, he was a member of the British cabinet, and he was responsible to the British Parliament. Now, next one. The Secretary of State for India was assisted by a council called Council of India, which contained the 15 members. obviously it will become impossible for a single person to look into so many areas. That's the reason why a Council of India was appointed, and the basic purpose is to assist the Secretary of State. Look at this. The Council of India was composed of exclusively of the people from England, means no Indian was there. Hope you are getting it. Now, look at the next point. Just a moment. Yeah, I'm highlighting it here. Yeah. The Secretary of State of India, who was responsible to the British Parliament, governed India through the Governor General, who is assisted by an executive council which consisted of higher officials of the government. So kindly remember here the sequence. The British government at the highest level. When it comes to India, powers of the crown was exercised through Secretary of State, and this Secretary of State of India, he is responsible to the British Parliament, and that Secretary of State governed India through the Governor General. That is nothing but Viceroy. Look at this. The administration of the country was unitary and rigidly centralized through 1858. Sorry, this is the 1858 Act, meaning so it became more centralized. In fact, it's 1858 Act. Now, look at this. When it comes to the provincial governments, though existing, headed by a governor, were mere the agents of the government of India and functioned under the direct control of Governor General. Already we have seen there is a Governor General for India. There may be governors for various provinces, but even then, those governors were functioned under the direct control of the Governor General. Look at this. There was no separation of functions. There was no separation of the functions. The legislative, executive, civil, and military authority was vested in Governor General in Council of India, who was responsible to the Secretary of State for India. The control of the Secretary of State of India over the Indian administration was absolute. Very, very important. When I use the word absolute, it is complete. And the machinery of the administration was totally unconcerned about the public opinion, meaning the problems of the people continued and they never used to bother about the problems of the people here. Next. Just a moment. Yeah. Now I'll show you one question of the year 2006. You can understand this. Just read the statement. And the question is related to which of the statements given above is or correct. Kindly see here, two statements are given. Either both the statements must be correct, or at least one statement should be correct, or both may be wrong. Kindly see here. The Charter Act of 1853 abolished East India Company's monopoly of Indian trade. Is it right? It's the wrong statement. But if you look at the statement number 2, under the Government of India Act of 1858, the British Parliament abolished the East India Company altogether and undertook the responsibility of ruling of India directly, meaning the statement number 2 is correct. So only the first statement is right. So hence you need to go for option B, and that is the answer. Next one. So immediately after that, so we have come across with another act called Indian Councils Act of 1861. But let me tell you one or two points here. The first Viceroy of India was Lord Canning. I told you this name. So when it comes to this gentleman, he was the person who tried to introduce the portfolio system in India in the year 1859. What do you mean by the portfolio system? Even today also in the government of India or in the government of any state, we use the word portfolio system. That is nothing but the ministries, that is nothing but the departments. Right? Whenever I use the word departmentalization, that is nothing but the division of the work. When you divide the whole work, it becomes easy for the entire administration to run the show very smoothly. Otherwise, here, if you have only one Prime Minister for India who is taking care of every ministry or every department, it becomes impossible for him to execute the responsibilities efficiently. Hence, only few portfolios are there with the Prime Minister of India, and the remaining ministries, remaining departments, he will hand it over to the other colleagues who are called the cabinet ministers. That is the reason why the home affairs is performed by one minister, defense by one minister, agriculture by some other minister, HRD by some other minister, and so on and so forth. So, meaning the concerned cabinet minister will be exclusively looking only into those areas. So, it becomes easy with complete concentration. He can focus on that one and he can try to solve the issues. At the same time, they are also answerable to the Prime Minister of India. That is nothing but division of the work. That is nothing but departmentalization, or that is nothing but the portfolio system that was introduced in India for the first time in the year 1859 by Lord Canning. Okay, but it was officially recognized by the British Parliament through the 1861 Act. That's what I'm going to show it to you now. Kindly wait a moment. I'm opening the document here. Look at this. Clear? Look at the first one. This act introduced a grain of popular element. This act introduced a grain of popular element by including some non-official members in the executive council while transacting legislative business like legislative council. Next one. The Viceroy of India would nominate Indians to the Legislative Council. It came into the picture for the first time, please. The power has been given to the Viceroy to nominate Indians to the Legislative Council. Legislative Council is a body which can make the legislations. You know the whole terminology now. So this happened through 1861 Act. The functions of the nominated members were confined. Indians were nominated, right? The functions of the nominated members were confined exclusively to the consideration of the legislative proposals placed before it by the Governor General, that is nothing but the Viceroy. What do you mean by this? These are the nominated members, but they were not permitted to propose anything, but you just consider the proposals which are placed before the Governor General. Even in the provinces also, for initiating the legislations, the prior sanction of the Viceroy was necessary. So this was made very, very clear, meaning the Governor General was made more powerful. There is nothing but the Viceroy, rather. Look at this. In the year 1862, the first Viceroy of India nominated Raja of Benares, the Maharaja of Patiala, and Sri Dinakar Rao to the Legislative Council. So it began 1861. The Act has come into the picture, which permitted the Viceroy to nominate the members to the Legislative Councils, and Lord Canning exercised his power in the year 1862 and he nominated some members. Look at this. This act also restored the powers of Bombay and Bengal presidencies. And the Legislative Council for Bengal was created in the year 1862. Another important point. Next one. The Legislative Council for North-West Frontier Province was created in the year 1866. Is that okay? Very, very important. Just remember this. And another important point for your information, please. For quite a long period of time, that area was called NWFP, North-West Frontier Province. But in the recent past, the name of this northwest frontier province has been changed to. You can look at the point what I've highlighted here in the box. You can have a look at this. It is in present day Pakistan, and recently the name has been changed to Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So this is the latest name of this area. Okay, now look at this simple point. You need not remember this. The Legislative Council for Punjab was created in the year 1897. This act gave recognition to the portfolio system. I told you me what is the meaning of portfolio system. Portfolio system means placing each member in charge of a specific department. Kindly remember, anything may be a question. Who introduced portfolio system? Answer should be Lord Canning. Which act permitted for the portfolio system? Answer is the 1861 Act. Look at this. Lord Canning, he introduced the portfolio system in 1859, but it was made into in the form of a legislation in the year 1861. This act also empowered the viceroy to issue the ordinances. What is an ordinance? So it's a big debatable this discussed topic here. So we'll have a detailed discussion when we come to the topic of the President of India. But for your information, let me just touch this area for a moment here. So the concept of ordinance has come to the picture in the year 1861 through this act. Okay. Now, this ordinance means it is a temporary act. On day one, we have understood that a bill is introduced in the parliament, meaning Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, then it will go to the President of India. President will sign, then it becomes an act. Number one. Number two. Sometimes what will happen, a bill will be introduced in the parliament only during the session. Sometimes there is a rest period for the parliament that is called a recess. When the parliament is not in the session, if the government of India urgently requires any particular act, during that time, the constitution has permitted the President of India to come out with an act that is called a temporary act. But we use the word ordinance for that. Meaning, because the parliament, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha are not there in the session, the initiative is taken by the President of India and he will issue a notification, and that is nothing but the ordinance. You are introducing a new law in the country, and that law will be used to exist in India for a period of time. But whenever the parliament will begin, within the specified period of time, that ordinance has to be passed by, it has to be cleared by both the houses of the parliament. Some more points are there. We'll be taking some time for the discussion. But here, just remember, this concept was introduced in India through the 1861 Act. Okay. Now, again, I'm going to the point, next point. Now, look at this. We have a question here, UPSC 2002, and look at this question. What is the meaning of this? Which one of the following acts of British India strengthened the Viceroy's authority over his executive council by substituting portfolio or department system for corporate functioning? Clear? And if you look at this, 1, 2, 3, 4, the answer is Indian Councils Act of 1861. With this one, the Viceroy's authority has been strengthened over the so-called the corporate functioning in the form of portfolio or the departmental system. Kindly remember this. It was already a question. And maybe by this time you might have understood that anything and everything may be a question in the examination. That's the reason why specifically I am going in a detailed manner. After listening to this class, you need not read any other textbook. You need not read any other material. You can just remember these points and straight away go to the examination. Next one. Later, we have come across with another act called 1892 Act. This is the Indian Councils Act of 1892. And look at these points here, again simple. This act gave the legislative councils the power of discussing the budget and addressing the questions to the executive. Kindly see here, for the first time, the Indians were nominated through the 1861 Act to the legislative councils. But when it comes to 1892, this act gave the legislative councils the power of discussing the budget for the first time, and they can address the questions to the executive. Today, in the parliament, if you look at this, the members who are present in the parliament, they pose the questions to the government because the government is there in the responsible position of executing certain things. They are answerable to the people, and that is the reason why every question that is posed by any member, that should be answered by the government. And for the first time, it was introduced in India where the legislative councils were permitted to question the executive. Look at this. This act also provided for the nomination of some non-official members to the legislative council by the viceroy. So this is one. And look at the next one. So we have another act called Indian Councils Act of 1909, otherwise called it is a Minto-Marley reforms. Kindly remember, so this act was implemented for a very, very short period of time. Hence, it is called the shortest lived act in India. Now, I am talking to you regarding the Indian Councils Act of 1909. Kindly remember each and every point again, as usual. Let's see this. If you look at these two names, Minto was the viceroy and Marley was the Secretary of State for India during that time. Minto Marley. Okay, now look at this. This act has increased the size of legislative councils by including elected non-official members. Right? This is how the strength was increased. And an element of election was introduced at the Central Legislative Council, but the official majority was maintained. Next, the members of the Legislative Council were allowed to ask the supplementary questions. Kindly see the difference. 1892 Act permitted to ask the questions. Whenever we use the word questions here, only one question can be asked by a member with respect to a particular subject. But the 1909 Act permitted for the supplementary questions can be asked by the members of the Legislative Council. What do you mean by supplementary question? Whenever I use the word supplementary question, kindly remember, this is an associated question with respect to the original question. Meaning, if you ask any question to any minister, the minister will give the answer. And if the concerned member is not happy with the answer, again, he can ask another question related to the same topic. That is called the supplementary question. And these supplementary questions were permitted since the year 1909. This act has permitted for the supplementary questions. Okay. Now, again, I am going to the document. Right. Kindly remember each point. Next one. The members were also allowed to move the resolutions on the budget or any matter of the public interest, but not the subjects like armed forces, foreign affairs, and Indian states. What do you mean by this? When you come to these particular points here, it will be exclusively decided by the viceroy. But members were not permitted to ask the questions on any of these areas like armed forces, foreign affairs, and the Indian states. Okay. Now, if you look at the next one, this act provided for the association of the Indians with the executive council of the viceroy and the governor, meaning Indians were permitted to enter into this. Enter this. The first Indian to join the Viceroy's Executive Council was Satyendra Prasad Sinha. Kindly remember the name here. He was the first Indian rather, to join the Viceroy's Executive Council. That is the beginning of Indians' entry into the Executive Council. Now, this particular act, the 1919 Act, 1909 Act, also introduced a system of a communal representation for Muslims by accepting the concept of separate electorate. Kindly remember, very, very important point here. This is the place where the British government has been criticized. India is a country which is a secular today, and since beginning also the concept of secularism was present. Of course, not officially, but the people were quite integrated. Maybe Hindu, maybe Muslim, maybe Christian are people, they used to mingle with each other and they used to share with each other. But the British government wanted to divide the India on the name of communalism, on the name of the separate electorate was introduced. What do you mean by this? Kindly remember, today in India we don't have the separate electorate system. Under the separate electorate system, a Muslim candidate will be elected only by the Muslim voters. For the first time for Muslims, it was introduced in the year 1909. Muslims is the next highest population in India after the Hindus. So they wanted to divide the society on the name of this religion. Hence, they have introduced this. They have motivated that group. Hence, Muslims will be permitted to be elected only by the Muslims. This is how communally India was divided through the 1909 Act. Kindly remember this point. That is the meaning of the separate electorate. Look at this. Under the separate electorate system, the Muslim members were to be elected only by the Muslim voters. For the first time, kindly see here the pathetic one, the seeds of separatism were sown. But otherwise, in the year 1906 itself, the Muslim League Party was established. Muslim League came into the existence. Indian National Congress, 1885, Muslim League, 1909, 1906. And through 1909 Act, the concept of communal representation for Muslims was accepted and it introduced a separate electorate. The meaning of the separate electorate is nothing but Muslim members were to be elected only by the Muslim voters. For the first time, the seeds of separatism were sown, and meaning this particular act has legalized the concept of communalism in India. Right? Now look at this. Minto was regarded as the father of communal electorate, and this Minto Marley reforms did not aim at establishing the parliamentary system of the government. Look at this. The final decision on all the matters were retained in the hands of the irresponsible executive. Very, very, very important. Now look at this. So there was a question in the UPSC in 1999. Look at this. The most short-lived of all the Britain's constitutional experiments in India was ABCD. Is it Indian Councils Act of 1861, or 1892, or 1909, or Government of India Act of 1919? Just how I told you in the beginning of this particular 1919 Act. So this is the most short-lived of all the Britain's constitutional experiments. Okay. Next, we'll be coming across with the so-called the Government of India Act of 1919. 19. Okay. Now let me come back to you onto the screen here for a moment. Right. See, so this is one important area, as I told you. Please read and revise these areas. It's very, very important for getting good marks in the examination. I'm just repeating, this is not just a part of Indian polity, this is also a part of the Indian history when it comes to that subject. Hence, that area is also covered under this. Plus, there is one special chapter, separate chapter in the public administration paper one. By understanding this one, that chapter will become so easy for us to understand in a better manner. Hence, today you please go through the notes that is present in our site www.kalyansir.net and read it from there. And you can stop at that particular place where I have taught the topics here. So kindly revise it two times, three times, four times. And if you want to watch the video again and again, you please do it. You please do it and don't keep any confusion in the mind. So because we have so many ads, so many years, so many names are coming into picture, sometimes they may be confusing. So remove the confusion at the earliest, and the rest of the part of this particular subject we'll have a discussion tomorrow. And today, let me stop it here. And thank you so much for being with me this morning. And we'll meet you tomorrow at the same time. Till then, I wish you all the very, very best and have a very, very, very good day. Thank you so much.